One of the most common questions I get is, what did it cost me to build Twisted Oak, my self-sustaining off-grid solar-powered home? I prefer to answer that question with a question to you. What is your budget, and what can you build within that budget? Whether you decide to build with a conventional loan or to build out of pocket, both paths start with a budget. And rather than tell you what I spent to build an off-grid home in Colorado 10 years ago, I'm going to share with you a story about two people who chose two very different paths for budgeting and building their sustainable homes. Then you can decide which path is right for you. Hey, Christina here with more tips and advice to guide you through creating an off-grid or sustainable home you'll love, without the typical frustration, overwhelm, and costly mistakes. If this is your first time here, then make sure to hit the big subscribe button and click the bell to make sure you get notified when I launch a new video. Freedom is greatest when the boundaries are clearly defined, and your first boundary is your budget. You need to get clear on what resources you have and how you can build a home that fits your personal, sustainable, and financial goals within your budget and your resources. Now, money is just one resource, and you will need to have some money to build a house. So get clear on what money you have to invest into this home. Then brainstorm your other resources that can help you make up the difference to get you a home that will fit your needs. Let's look at this process through the eyes of two people taking two very different approaches. Let's call these characters Jack and Jill. Once upon a time, Jack and Jill went up the hill to build a sustainable home, but they ended up with two very different outcomes. Let's start with Jack. Jack decides he's going to get a mortgage for his new home. So he goes and he finds a mortgage broker, and he fills out all the information that he needs to in order to get a loan. And the mortgage broker looks at that information and he comes back to him and he says, okay, Jack, based on the information you gave me, I can give you this amount of money for a loan to build your new home. And Jack says, great, that was easy peasy. That number, that's my budget. Now there's a couple of things that Jack could do at this stage that might save him a lot of frustrations in the future. And that is, one, he could look at that number and say, okay, I've been approved for that amount, but can I really afford that amount? And the other thing he needs to look at, can he afford that amount should something unexpected happen, say a mortgage crisis or an unexpected loss of job due to what we're experiencing now in this global pandemic? So Jack takes that number that he gets from his mortgage broker and he goes and he finds himself a contractor. And he tells the contractor, I've got this amount of money to build a house. How big a house can you build me for this amount of money? And the contractor asks him a few questions. And some of the questions are, well, do you want kind of a moderate type of package for your house, or do you want a really high-end finishes in your house? So the lower end might include, a low-grade carpet, vinyl flooring, and some laminate countertops. And the mid-range package that he's offering is, might have a better carpet and maybe some tile rather than laminate. And if he goes with the higher end package, he's looking at maybe he can get some wool carpet and some bamboo flooring and some stonework and some granite countertops. So Jack kind of looks at his numbers and he decides he's just going to go with the mid-range package. So that's great. So with that information, the contractor tells him, I can build you this big of a house for the amount of money that you have. And Jack is like, great, sounds good. So with that number that the contractor gives him for the size of house that he can afford, he then goes and finds an architect. And he tells the architect, well, I've got this amount of money and the contractor says I can build this big a house. So design me a house that's this big. Now let's see how Jill approaches this. Jill decides that she's going to try and build out of pocket. So she really sits down with a notebook and she goes through all of the resources that she has, including the amount of money that she has to invest into the house. And she looks at the equity that she has in her current home, and she looks at her savings and her investments, and she looks at everything that she feels that she can invest into this home. but then she also looks at other resources. And she lists those out too. And her very willingness to learn and to participate in the project adds a lot of value, is a huge resource for her. She also just looks at other skills that she has, and she lists those down. And at the same time, she makes a list of all of her personal goals and her financial goals and the sustainable goals that she really wants to incorporate into this home. And then she creates a box and she starts putting all of the ideas that she wants to incorporate into her home into a place where she can really look at them. So she might be saving YouTube videos that had ideas, and she might be clipping articles out of newspapers or magazines, or anywhere she sees something that she wants to incorporate into her home, she puts into this box. And then she does a very important exercise, and she gets out a pad of paper and she lists all the rooms in her home. And she starts paying attention to how much time she spends in those rooms. And she does that and she records that for over, say, a day, and then she looks at it over a week. And then she starts really thinking about it and how much time she spends in those rooms over the course of the year. And what she figures out is that she can live in a much smaller home than she ever dreamed she could. And when I say live in a home, I mean really live happily and abundantly with all of her needs met. And then what Jill does is she decides that she's going to learn and educate herself about the basics that will make her home the most sustainable. So she starts reading and studying and maybe taking workshops on passive solar design, how she can heat and cool her home for free, how to heat her water with the sun, and how she can generate clean regenerative electricity in her area. And she also studies greywater garden, and she just learns the basics so she understands which of these features she can incorporate into her home and which may not feel right for her. And then Jill starts looking at building materials, and she looks beyond building with just the traditional stick-framed houses that she sees everywhere. And what she realizes is that if she builds with materials that don't require a lot of skilled labor, then she can learn very quickly how to build with these materials, and she can add some of her labor to the project. In the meantime, Jack has just gotten his very first set of plans from the architect. Now, this is just the first round, and this round may have cost Jack up to $10,000 or even more, depending on his area and the architect he hired. But he's very excited to see what the architect has designed for him, so he rolls out the plans and takes a look. And the first thing he notices is that there aren't very many windows on the south side of the house. And he thought he had told the architect that he was interested in passive solar heating and cooling. So he approaches the architect and says, I really wanted to incorporate passive solar heating and cooling, but I don't see very many windows on the south side. Now, this could go a couple of different ways for Jack, depending on the architect. The architect may or may not understand passive solar heating and cooling, so he may just try and talk Jack out of it. Now, if Jack is very knowledgeable about passive solar heating and cooling, he might be able to work with the architect and try and get that incorporated into the design in these very early stages. Either way, Jack is going to pay the architect to make another round of drawings for him to incorporate the changes that he wants. Now, this is not uncommon at all, and this is just part of the process. It often takes many, many cycles of working with a designer or architect and many rounds of plans with changes and updates before somebody gets a set of plans that they're really happy with. In the meantime, Jill has not paid anyone a cent yet. And she is playing with the spaces in her house, and she's having great fun doing it because she's using construction paper and markers and crayons, and she's playing with the spaces in her house and kind of laying them out in a very general context. And then when she gets all of the spaces that she wants to have in her house, and she knows the general location, and she knows she wants to face the house south because she wants to incorporate passive solar, and when she gets everything just right, then she gets out the graph paper and she starts drawing out the house in a little bit more detail, in enough detail that she can take this drawing to a drafter or a designer and have them draw up the final plans for her. But because she knows exactly where she wants everything and she's put all this thought into it and she's already incorporated the systems that she wants in the house, she will go through far fewer cycles of getting the plans that she wants than Jack did. Now Jack's very excited because the house is under construction and he is going to make a visit to his building site. And the builder has already put up the walls. And Jack is very excited to see how this is all laying out in the real world. So he tours through the house and suddenly the house looks a lot different than it did on paper. And he realizes that there's some things he doesn't really like about it. Like, he doesn't really like how it feels to have that wall between the kitchen and the dining room. So he talks to the contractor about removing that wall. And then he sees that the doors that are on site are those hollow core doors that he got with the mid-size package that he agreed to with the contractor, and realizes that he really would prefer to have a higher end, more solid door. So he starts talking to the contractor about how they can make those changes. And this is going to be very expensive for Jack because this is what we call a process of change orders. And so the contractor has to write up a change order. And Jack may have to get reapproval from his mortgage for the increased price. And then he also has to pay the contractor to remove that wall and to send back the doors and to order the new doors. So it gets very expensive very quickly. Now let's check in with Jill because she's under construction as well. And she's hired a builder who's agreed that she can work alongside him. And she's been having so much fun because she's learned how to work with these building materials that she chose, that she can actually add her fairly unskilled labor to the labor of the house. So she's bringing down the cost of her house. She's also having a great deal of fun scavenging for materials, and she's going to garage sales, and she's going to flea markets, and she's looking in the paper for all these great things that she's adding to her house. The other thing that's happening is as it's being built, she can see the minor changes that she might want to make because she's there and she can make those changes before they're built and then have to be torn down and rebuilt. Jill is also sourcing a lot of the materials herself, so she's doing a lot of the shopping and the research. And so she's discovered that she can buy natural finishes that are not toxic and that are easy to apply. So she's going to take care of adding all the finishes, and she's also in charge of making sure that they're non-toxic and they fit her needs. So now both houses are complete, and Jack's house came in about 30% over budget. And this is not uncommon. But because he has this extra mortgage payment now and the extra costs for all the construction, he's having to work longer hours at his corporate job. Now Jill, on the other hand, came in under budget. And because she eliminated her mortgage and her monthly utility bills, she was able to quit her corporate job and that long commute. And she's been able to start a business that she can run from home that she really loves. Now Jack's contractor painted his house with a lot of toxic paints and finishes. So now when Jack spends much time at home, he's noticing that he has headaches and his sinuses are inflamed. And Jill sleeps soundly in her bed and wakes in the morning to the dappled light coming across her bedspread. And she loves coming home to a house that she's designed that absolutely fits all of her goals and her values perfectly. Now Jack, he's not sleeping very well because he had to settle on that low-end refrigerator because of all the other costs of his home, and it's really loud and it keeps him awake at night, along with his expensive furnace system that kicks on and off all day and night, and that keeps him awake as well. On the other hand, Jill has incorporated systems that don't need pumps, fans, or switches, so her house is always peaceful and quiet and a very serene place for her to live and to sleep. So as the temperatures fall and the light shines deeper and deeper into Jill's house and keeps it warm and cozy, Jack gets his first utility bill. Now, even though the names and faces in this story have been changed to protect the innocent, the events depicted in this story are based on real events. Whether you plan to build out of pocket or with a conventional loan, on the power grid or off the grid, Defining your personal, financial, and sustainable goals and setting a clear budget will save you tens of thousands of dollars or more in design and construction costs. I know that anyone who puts their mind to it can build a sustainable home within a budget. Designing your home consciously and efficiently, either on the grid or off the power grid, can drastically reduce your building expenses, utility bills, and your impact on the planet. I invite you to check out our introductory course that will take you through all the groundwork that Jill did to build the home of her dreams. It's $49 that will save you thousands of dollars and a lot of frustrations that Jack experienced. Check out the link in the description down below. And help me help you by leaving me a comment. Tell me what kind of videos would help you accomplish your dream of living in a self-sustaining or off-grid home. I post a video every Saturday morning, so stay tuned for more videos on designing, planning, and building your off-grid or sustainable home.